Tom Selleck's Final Truth, the revelation that changed everything, is one of those episodes that Hollywood tried to hide for decades, but today you're going to discover details involving backstage controversies, unexpected decisions that nearly destroyed his career, and personal revelations that shocked even his closest friends, creating a mystery many believed would never be uncovered. Here you will learn about silent disputes with major studios, the accusations that threatened his impeccable image, and the secret Tom kept for years, directly influencing both his public and private life. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and leave your like, because this shows YouTube that our content is relevant and helps the video reach more people. And if you want to support the channel even more, consider using Super Thanks, but if you can't, just comment on which revelation surprised you the most. Watch until the end, because the final truth revealed will leave you completely stunned. The origins of Tom Selleck carry an almost poetic simplicity that strikingly contrasts with the icon he would later become. Born in Detroit in 1945, Tom grew up in a close-knit family marked by traditional values, responsibility, and a routine that prioritized work, discipline, and respect. As a child, his family moved to California, where he was exposed to a more open lifestyle full of possibilities, yet curiously, Hollywood was not part of his dreams. Tom was a shy young man, focused on his studies, passionate about sports, and completely unaware of the world of fame. His main goal was to build a stable life, perhaps as a businessman or a basketball player, as he excelled on the court, and even earned an athletic scholarship to attend university. This formative period was decisive, as it shaped his reserved, pragmatic personality and a deep understanding that no success comes without effort. Interestingly, his entry into the entertainment world was unplanned. It happened almost by chance when some friends began to notice his striking presence, imposing physique, and that natural charisma that he himself had not yet realized. Encouraged, Tom agreed to take on small modeling jobs to supplement his income, unaware that these first steps would open doors that would forever change his life. Agencies quickly recognized that there was something different about him, a rare combination of classic beauty, genuine humility, and a magnetism that didn't need to be forced. Gradually, invitations for commercials began to appear, and although Tom did not see himself as an actor, he realized that the opportunity could help him pay bills, save some money, and perhaps try something new. But the most surprising turning point came when, after a few auditions, producers saw in him a dramatic potential that he himself had not yet recognized. From that moment, the path to Hollywood ceased to be a distant curiosity and quietly began to transform into destiny. Tom started studying acting, enrolled in evening courses, and quietly began building a dream he had never imagined having. His journey was neither immediate nor glamorous. He faced rejections, heard harsh criticism, and often questioned whether it was truly for him. However, his authenticity and dedication gradually honed his talent. This unexpected, almost accidental beginning became one of the most fascinating elements of his story because it shows how life sometimes takes us exactly where we need to be, even when we are not the ones choosing the path. Tom Selleck's rise to stardom with Magnum P.I. represents one of the most iconic moments of his career, but it also reveals how success can bring unexpected pressures and complex behind-the-scenes negotiations. When the series premiered in 1980, Tom quickly became a cultural phenomenon, with his charisma, iconic mustache, relaxed style, and the famous Ferrari capturing the public's attention. However, behind the glitz and fame, there were significant tensions with the studios. The series' success brought long hours of filming under the Hawaiian sun, strict demands, and contracts that limited his creative freedom and personal life. These restrictions forced Tom to make difficult decisions, including turning down film roles that could have further boosted his cinematic career. Throughout the seasons, he constantly negotiated to secure better working conditions and more autonomy, striving to balance his career, health, and family. Although the negotiations were tense, Tom always maintained professionalism and respect, demonstrating maturity and dedication. This period solidified his image as an actor who was not only talented but also firm and self-aware, capable of handling fame without losing his identity and values. Magnum, P.I. is one of the most iconic journeys in American television, and at the same time, for Tom, marked not only by the series' enormous success, but also by a series of tense negotiations, difficult decisions, and behind-the-scenes moments that reveal how the path to the top is not always as glamorous as it seems. When Magnum, P.I. premiered in 1980, Tom had already spent years facing rejections, frustrating auditions, and small roles, but nothing indicated that this character, a charismatic, witty detective with a unique sense of humor and unmistakable style, would become a cultural icon. The mustache, the relaxed look, the patterned shirt, and even the famous Ferrari immediately became symbols of the character, and Tom's natural chemistry with the role propelled the series to a level few could have anticipated. The audience simply fell in love. But what almost no one knew was that behind Magnum's easy smile, there was an atmosphere of enormous tension between Tom and the studios, especially in the early years. The responsibility of carrying a high-budget weekly series demanded an enormous effort, long hours of filming under the intense Hawaiian sun, few days off, and the constant need to maintain the charismatic performance that the audience expected. As the series exploded in ratings, the first disagreements arose over contracts, image rights, involvement in creative decisions, and even the distance between the filming location and Tom's personal life, which began to feel trapped by an extremely exhausting schedule. Another frequently mentioned point is that due to contractual obligations with the series, Tom missed important opportunities in film, including roles that could have changed the trajectory of his career. He has mentioned in interviews that he was too committed to Magnum, P.I. to accept certain offers that came precisely at the moment Hollywood was seeing him as a new movie heartthrob. This situation became a source of frustration and discontent, leading him to rethink his relationship with the entertainment world. Furthermore, the pressure to maintain his image, both physical and behavioral, weighed more heavily than the public could imagine. The studio's new Magnum was a valuable product, and therefore there was great concern about preserving Tom's image from any controversy, which resulted in strict rules about public appearances, parallel professional commitments, and even limits on interviews. For Tom, this created a feeling of living under constant surveillance. Despite the difficulties, he always made it clear that he was grateful for the role and recognized the extraordinary impact the series had on his life. However, he also stated that success came at a high cost, mental strain, long negotiations for salary adjustments, disputes with executives over the series' creative direction, and above all, the sense that his personal life was being sacrificed for the production. There were moments when he considered leaving the series, not for lack of love for the character, but out of a need to regain balance. Eventually, over the course of the seasons, Tom managed to better negotiate his space, his schedule, and his working conditions, building a more stable relationship with the studios. Tom Selleck's journey is full of iconic moments, but few phases sparked as much curiosity as the collection of interviews, candid statements, and controversial remarks he has given over the decades. Although Tom has always cultivated a reserved, elegant, and discreet public image, there were moments when the barrier between his private life and public persona opened, revealing frustrations, discomforts, personal truths, and viewpoints that surprised fans, journalists, and even colleagues. What made these statements so impactful was not the existence of actual scandals, but the direct, no-nonsense way he spoke, always making it clear that he had no interest in meeting expectations manufactured by Hollywood. Over time, this created a myth around him. The myth that Tom was hiding something, or that there was a final truth behind his restrained behavior, something he would only reveal when he had matured enough to look at his own story with complete honesty. It was precisely this mix of mystery, frankness, and contradiction that made his interviews constant material for analysis. Many moments considered controversial arose not from inappropriate behavior, but from strong opinions. Tom never hesitated to say that he did not adapt to the frantic pace of the industry, nor to the type of glamour that rejects privacy and turns human beings into characters for public consumption. In various interviews, he stated that fame demanded an emotionally high price, something that forced him to distance himself from people he valued, and even miss important family moments while committed to work that required long hours, constant travel, and rigid contracts. This surprised many fans, who had always seen him as someone perfectly comfortable with his privileged position. Still, Tom insisted that fame was never his goal, and that for him, the hardest part was not being famous, but appearing famous all the time. In one widely discussed interview at the time, Tom confessed that he carried deep regrets for having prioritized his career during certain periods of his youth, especially during the peak of Magnum P.I. He commented that the pace of the series left him exhausted and emotionally drained, to the point of feeling that he was living more to satisfy external expectations than to pursue personal happiness. This honesty surprised many admirers because while the public saw a charismatic actor living at the height of fame, he was dealing with sleepless nights, anxiety, and a constant feeling of being trapped in a character the world insisted on confusing with who he really was. His calm tone when discussing this made it even clearer how impactful and, in a way, painful these experiences had been. Another moment that generated significant attention was when Tom, without beating around the bush, spoke about past financial missteps. He admitted to having trusted people too much who did not necessarily have his best interests at heart, and that some of these decisions almost compromised a significant part of his wealth. The actor did not name names or go into details, but the admission of vulnerability, especially from someone perceived as stable, strong, and centered, had enormous impact. Fans praised his courage in speaking about mistakes, while parts of the media turned the topic into sensational headlines, as if it were scandal. Tom, however, remained calm in the face of such reactions, stating that people make mountains out of molehills when they refuse to accept that even idols are human. Some of his most discussed interviews were notable not for the content itself, but for the tone. Tom has always had a direct, sometimes dry manner, which many interpret as coldness. On talk shows and variety programs, there were moments when he seemed uncomfortable with invasive questions, and his sincerity in answering, often with short responses or unexpectedly deep observations, was interpreted by the press as hostility. But Tom insisted it was not a lack of friendliness, but a conscious refusal to turn his life into a spectacle. He also remarked on several occasions that he felt the media treated artists like commodities, expecting them to offer intimate confessions in exchange for visibility. The way he resisted this was seen by some as rebellion, by others as pure authenticity. One of the moments that resonated most with fans came years after his peak, when he was already established on Blue Bloods. Tom spoke openly about aging, about the feeling of no longer being Hollywood's desired young heartthrob, and about the need to accept new phases of life. His statement that fame is a beautiful illusion but a very comfortable prison went viral and sparked heated debates on social media. Some interpreted it as criticism of the industry, others saw it as a melancholic reflection. What no one denied was that Tom was being more honest than ever. There were also interviews marked by reflections on masculinity, public image, and the expectations imposed by fans. Tom said that for many years, he felt compelled to represent the figure of the perfect man, strong, calm, confident, and always in control, characteristics associated with the Magnum character that the public automatically transferred to his real personality. He admitted that this distanced him from vulnerability and made him hide emotions he would have liked to share earlier, especially with those close to him. When he admitted this publicly, many fans were moved, as seeing such a solid figure acknowledge deep human fragilities was a positive shock. Another topic that always generated conversation was his relationship with the media. Tom was honest in saying that he distrusted the celebrity system and believed that many scandals were created by the press to maintain audiences. He calmly stated that he preferred to lose headlines than to lose his peace. This firm yet serene attitude fueled the perception that Tom was one of the few artists who refused to play the game, and paradoxically, this made him even more compelling. However, one of the most impactful moments came when he decided to tell his final truth, a phrase many outlets began to use. It was not about a bombshell secret, but rather the admission that his life, though full of opportunities and achievements, was also marked by sacrifices, renunciations, and internal struggles. Tom spoke about fear, insecurity, difficult choices, and the awareness that, to preserve his family and mental health, he had to say many no's in an industry that rewards those who say yes to everything. This revelation, more intimate than controversial, resonated with fans because it showed that even the most admired icons struggle, suffer, question themselves, and fight for balance. These statements, spread over decades, build a more complex and human image of Tom Selleck. He never sought sensationalism. On the contrary, he sought truth. And that choice, simple yet powerful, became the true reason his interviews resonated with so many fans, because they showed that the man behind the mustache, the smile, and the unforgettable characters was, above all, authentic, honest, and deeply human. However, deeper, more sensitive, and rarely explored chapters of Tom Selleck's public life mark his journey after the peak of his fame, revealing a man trying to adapt to a rapidly changing world while still grappling with internal pressures, external expectations, and insecurities that had quietly accumulated over decades. When Magnum P.I. ended and the intense shine of stardom began to stabilize, Tom faced a challenge many artists encounter, but few admit: how to remain relevant when the industry starts prioritizing new talents, new trends, and a frenzied production pace that demands constant reinvention. For someone with a reserved personality, averse to self-promotion, and the culture of overexposure, this process was even more difficult. Technological changes, the rise of social media, the emergence of new entertainment platforms, and the accelerated pace of digital media created a reality in which staying visible required constant presence, something Tom, by nature, avoided. During this period, he faced dark moments rarely discussed openly, but evident in his more introspective behavior, and in how he spoke about the pressure to continually prove himself. Tom was never driven by the obsession with being the center of attention, but the natural decline of public exposure, combined with the quiet fear of being forgotten, triggered intense internal conflicts. He mentioned in some interviews that he felt he had missed important opportunities due to rigid contracts and past decisions, and that this weighed on his conscience. The sense that he could have done more, achieved more, expanded his career, especially in film, stayed with him for years. This type of regret is common among great artists, but in Tom's case, who had always projected serenity and control, this admission revealed a deep vulnerability. Another significant challenge during this phase was professional uncertainty. After years as the absolute lead of a hugely successful series, Tom went through a period of instability in which roles did not appear as frequently, and some projects he invested in did not receive the expected reception. This led him to question his own ability to reinvent himself, something he described as a second artistic birth, only more painful than the first. Competition within the industry had also become fiercer, with younger actors prioritized for leading roles, while artists of his generation had to fight for space in productions that often no longer valued the classic style that had made him successful. In this quest for relevance, Tom also faced moments of loneliness, even when surrounded by people. He felt that the world was changing too quickly, and that his more traditional, reserved vision of career and personal life seemed out of sync with what Hollywood valued. The weight of this feeling led him to seek refuge in spaces far from the industry. His farm became more than a home. It was an emotional sanctuary, a space where he could breathe without judgment and regain balance when pressure became too heavy. He admitted that this period helped him better understand who he truly was, what he wanted to preserve, and what he needed to leave behind. However, the struggle for relevance was not limited to his career. Tom also faced challenges related to aging, not just physically, but in the emotional impact of realizing that time brings inevitable limitations. He mentioned moments when he looked in the mirror and did not recognize the man reflected there. This feeling, common to everyone, is amplified when one has lived for decades under the expectation of maintaining a perfect, youthful image, always camera-ready. Tom went through periods when he felt disconnected from himself, as if living within a public version that no longer fully matched his reality. Another complicated aspect of this phase was the weight of self-expectation. Tom has always been demanding of himself, and this trait, which helped him early in his career, sometimes became an emotional barrier. The internal pressure to remain relevant, admired, and respected made it difficult to accept pauses and rest. There was always the silent question: do they still expect something from me? Am I still needed in the industry? Does the public still remember me fondly? These uncertainties created a period of deep introspection, during which he had to revisit his own history, his mistakes, his successes, and most importantly, his limits. In addition, there were physical challenges. Age brought aches, limitations, and the need to adjust his work pace. Action sequences, long filming days, constant travel, all of this began to demand more effort. Tom has shared that, at times, he felt his body was asking for rest long before his mind. This struggle between wanting to do more and not being able to do everything, as before, generated frustration. Yet, he maintained admirable discipline, focused on his health, moderate exercise, and a routine that respected his body's signals. But the transition was not easy. Professionally, Tom also had to deal with inevitable comparisons. The industry was full of new heartthrobs, new stars, and new narrative formats. And although he never dedicated himself to competing with other actors, it was impossible to ignore that times had changed. Producers sought younger faces, more modern stories, and bolder styles. In this context, Tom decided to focus on more mature, human roles that resonated with his own stage of life. This intelligent strategy was crucial for his return to the spotlight with Blue Bloods, a series that became a benchmark of stability and a professional rebirth for him. But before this return, there was silence, uncertainty, and struggle. There were moments when it seemed he was disappearing from the media, while new names dominated headlines. Fans missed him, unaware that behind the scenes, Tom was rebuilding his artistic identity. This dark period also led to important personal reflections on the meaning of fame, career, and private life. He realized that true relevance does not lie in constant exposure, but in the ability to touch people with authenticity, something he began to prioritize with even greater conviction. When he finally returned to prominence, already with a renewed image and a more mature approach, Tom demonstrated greater confidence, balance, and a clearer vision of his role in the artistic world. He no longer sought to compete with anyone, he simply aimed to give his best. Paradoxically, this made his relevance grow naturally. Over time, he came to be seen not only as a classic actor but also as a symbol of resilience, integrity, and longevity in a rapidly changing world. Tom Selleck's struggle for relevance was not about reclaiming fame, but about rediscovering purpose. And is precisely this element, the profound humanity of this journey, that makes this phase one of the most moving and inspiring of his story. But as a reward for his hard work and many years of effort, Tom Selleck has accumulated not only monetary wealth, but also the maturity of someone who has learned, often the hard way, to balance fame, money, and purpose. Even after decades of career, million-dollar contracts, and high-stakes negotiations, Selleck has always approached financial success as a consequence of conscious, and at times painful, choices. Today, at 80 years old, his estimated net worth exceeds tens of millions of dollars, accumulated through salaries from iconic series, film appearances, memorable advertising deals, and discreet yet extremely well-managed investments. However, the most interesting aspect of his financial journey is not just the amount of money, but how he chose to use it throughout his life. Tom was never the typical extravagant star. While many of his peers flaunted cars, mansions, and lavish parties, he preferred to cultivate a quiet rural life on his California property, prioritizing quality of life, family stability, and emotional security. This farm, in fact, became a symbol of his identity, a place where he could breathe away from Hollywood pressures and find refuge during periods of burnout, media conflicts, professional stagnation, and even contractual disputes that threatened his continued presence in the industry. Over the years, his fortune not only provided comfort, but also creative freedom. After experiencing situations where rigid contracts interfered with his well-being, Selleck made it a personal rule to work only on projects that moved him in some way. This philosophy, almost an intimate manifesto, became even stronger after what many fans began to call his final revelation, that rare moment of honesty in which, now more mature, he spoke openly about fears, regrets, emotional exhaustion, and the decisions he had to make to protect his mental health and his family. This revelation, widely discussed in the media, reignited conversations about burnout in Hollywood, abusive contracts, and how the appearance of absolute success can hide silent weariness. Interestingly, this episode also positively reinforced his public image, presenting him not as an invincible hero, but as a real, vulnerable, and deeply human man. Tom Selleck's financial legacy, therefore, is not merely monetary. It is intrinsically linked to the integrity with which he has guided his life. His net worth is indeed considerable, but its true value lies in how he has transformed it into emotional stability and security for those he loves. Over the years, he has made a point of personally managing many of his contracts, ensuring that each negotiation aligned with his principles. Some say that because of his firm stance, he missed out on some enormous opportunities, including roles in projects that would later become cultural phenomena, yet Selleck has never shown regret. For him, nothing was more important than maintaining authenticity, even if it meant foregoing impressive sums of money. Today, when he looks at his wealth, the actor sees something far greater than a number. He sees the possibility of aging with dignity, preserving his privacy, and ensuring that his artistic legacy continues independently of external pressures. His final revelation marked not only a period of public honesty, but also the beginning of a phase of greater serenity, in which he can celebrate all he has achieved without needing to prove anything to anyone. His legacy, therefore, is dual. He leaves the world a treasure trove of unforgettable characters and a powerful lesson about authenticity, emotional courage, and the value of saying no when the price of fame becomes too high.